She handed me the itinerary like it was a Valentine's Day card. Crisp edges, folded twice, titled in soft italics, Alma Vita Wellness Retreat, Portugal. Just a week, Angela said, setting down her oat milk latte. Yoga, silence, hot stone massages, the whole deal. My bonus hit, figured I'd finally do something just for me. She said it so casually, like I hadn't paid for her MFA or helped her mom out of medical debt last year. But I nodded, because that's what I do. Nod, smile. Pretend to understand that finding yourself at 51 means leaving your husband behind with a freezer full of lean cuisines and a neurotic cocker spaniel. You sure this is just for you? I asked, watching her tuck a new silk eye mask into her carry-on. It still had the tag on it. She leaned down, pressed a dry kiss to my cheek, and said, "Don't be dramatic. I'll FaceTime every night." She didn't. The first evening, she texted at 9:03 p.m. No signal here. Dead zone. Love you. I sent back a thumbs up emoji because I've learned emojis are safer than words. Day 2, silence. Day 3, I opened our shared iCloud photo album to find Angela in a lemon-colored sundress, laughing on a yacht, flute of something sparkling in hand, bare feet on polished teak. And standing next to her, arm tucked around her waist, was Robert, her ex-husband, the one she once described as a charming virus. Funny. He looked perfectly healthy to me. She hadn't even changed the album name. Still labeled Portugal Inner Peace. The algorithm served it to me like a warm cookie. Angela just added 12 new photos to your shared album. And there she was, kissing his cheek in front of a coral reef. Him rubbing sunscreen on her shoulders. Her throwing her head back in laughter like she hadn't just ghosted her actual husband 3,700 miles away. I stared at the screen for a solid 5 minutes. No rage, no tears, just this icy, precise sort of clarity, like someone hit the dimmer switch on my heartbeat. You ever have one of those moments where everything you've been ignoring politely knocks at the door and says, "Hi, I'm here now. Let's talk about everything you buried under being a good partner"? Yeah, that was mine. And before we go any further, if you're the kind of man who's been told to just be happy she's taking time for herself, I need you to listen to this part, because this is where the story shifts. It doesn't get loud, it gets exact. And hey, if any of this hits home, do the team a favor and hit that follow button. Over 90% of you read without subscribing, but it helps us keep telling stories they want buried. I closed the album, didn't text, didn't call. I just stood up, walked to the drawer by the fridge, and pulled out the tan folder labeled "In Case of Rain." Inside, account info, routing numbers, legal contacts, copies of old house titles, passwords, stuff I'd kept organized not out of distrust, but because some part of me knew that one day this might not be a drill. I sat back down and opened our joint banking profile. She thought I never paid attention to our finances, just trusted her with the budgeting, the bills, the quarterly where we're at conversations. She was wrong. I clicked into the International Transactions tab, paused, and then, with all the ceremony of ordering a pizza, I disabled her card overseas. Not canceled, just limited. No alerts, no red flags, just a quiet little wall placed between her and my retirement fund. Then I moved $148,000 into a separate account, one I'd opened in 20 after a weird conversation with her financial advisor cousin that didn't sit right with me. By 11:23 p.m., the money was safe, my lawyer's number was favorited, and Angela's latest photo, her and Robert clinking glasses over ceviche, was staring back at me from the iPad. Her caption? "Sometimes the past belongs in the present." I closed the app and went for a walk. The thing about betrayal, real betrayal, is that it doesn't scream, it doesn't explode. It's not cinematic, it's quiet, surgical, a hairline fracture that splits the bone long before you feel it snap. So no, I didn't call her, I didn't rage text paragraphs or ask her if Robert was staying in the same suite. I didn't send her screenshots with sarcastic little circles around the wine glasses. I logged into the shared banking profile instead. There it was. Every debit, every auto pay, every click she assumed I'd never notice. A few retreat charges in Lisbon, some boutique spa treatments, and one 2300 dinner at a place called Mar do Tempo. Sea of time. Fitting, really. She was burning both. I hovered over her travel card, paused, then scrolled to the international use toggle. Click. That's it. No security alert, no fireworks, just a line of code silently choking the oxygen flow. I didn't stop there. The separate account I'd set up back in 2019, after her third girls-only weekend ended with a hotel charge in Atlantic City, was still active, hadn't touched it in years, just fed it small transfers like a squirrel stashing away acorns no one believed he'd ever need. I moved over 90% of our liquid cash, $148,000. Not wiped, just moved. If she checked the balance, it would still look reasonable, comfortable. But she wouldn't check. Angela never looks under the hood, she just drives the car like it's hers. She was always proud of being unbothered by money. Translation, she spent without guilt because she thought I was too boring to do anything reckless with it. She was right. I'm not reckless. I'm prepared. Next, I looked at our home utilities, which she never bothered managing. Everything was still under my name. I changed nothing, just noted the billing cycle. I'd need it later. By the time the system confirmed the transfer, it was close to midnight. I opened her album again. There they were, Angela and Robert, clinking glasses, her head tilted toward him like they were still 28 and stupid. She looked happy. The kind of happy that has no room for guilt, no tension in the shoulders, no flinch in the smile. Her caption, "Sometimes the past belongs in the present." I've read breakup poetry more subtle than that. I set the iPad down, leaned back in my chair, and listened. The house was silent, except for the clock in the hallway, ticking like a metronome measuring the tempo of decay. Angela had always hated that clock, said it reminded her of hospitals. I'd kept it. I laced up my boots and went for a walk. No music, no dog. Just me and the sound of my own breath, measured even, quieter than the wind. I didn't feel rage. What I felt was alignment, like the pieces of my life had been floating just off track for years, and now finally they were clicking into place. She wasn't coming back to the same house. She just didn't know it yet. Because the truth is, once you stop playing the role they wrote for you, good man, patient husband, reliable provider, they don't know what to do with you. They don't realize that the quiet ones don't forgive. They just plan better. By morning, the fog in my head had burned off. I made coffee, sliced an apple, fed the dog, and sat down at the kitchen island like it was just another Thursday. Only it wasn't. Something fundamental had shifted, not in the world, but in me. I wasn't grieving anymore. I was reconfiguring. First stop, Harold, my attorney of 12 years. Harold wears suits like they offend him, and his office always smells like lukewarm Chinese food and expensive toner. He raised an eyebrow the second I walked in. "You're early, and you brought the red folder." "Just tying up some loose ends," I said, setting it down. We spent an hour going over the trust, the durable POA, the asset protections we discussed back in 20 but never implemented. Angela had laughed when I brought those up back then, called it preparing for a flood during a drought. Well, the storm hit. Harold didn't ask questions. Just handed me the right forms and said, "You want her to be notified?" "No," I replied. "Let the mail do its job." Next, I called Marcus, our accountant, technically my accountant now. We went through the investment accounts, the portfolio Angela thought was too boring to ever bother with, and cleaned up beneficiary designations. She'd still get her legal share, but the side doors were quietly closing. By noon, I was on the road to Maine. 5 hours up, smooth ride, nothing but podcasts and the kind of mental stillness I hadn't felt in years. The rental cabin Angela always called that mosquito trap you insist on loving sat on a bluff overlooking the water, battered and loyal. The couple who managed the place, Rick and Tasha, met me with fresh coffee and a handshake that meant more than small talk. "Tasha, Rick, quick update," I said, handing over new documentation. "The deed's under a trust now. You're still managers, but if anyone comes sniffing around, refer them to Harold. No direct disclosures." Rick grinned. "Got it. Angela still hate this place? She'd rather live in a sandbox. Then it's safe and," he said, and we all laughed. Inside, I checked the safe under the floorboard, still untouched. 2 rolls of bearer bonds, my dad was paranoid, the old silver coins, the deed to the land, and a USB drive I'd labeled in Sharpie, Echo. I didn't touch it, just needed to know it was there. Back in the car, I called Sarah my daughter. 28, smart, married, lives in Chicago. Her voice came in with a little static and a lot of hesitation. "Hey, Dad, everything okay?" Just wanted to give you a heads up, I said, pulling onto the freeway. Things might shift soon. Shift? She echoed. Like what? Nothing dangerous, just the landscape changing a bit. Silence, then. Is Mom okay? She will be, I said. Eventually. Sarah didn't push. She never does. She inherited that from me. Meanwhile, I opened Facebook in a gas station parking lot to check something I already knew I'd regret. Angela had uploaded a video. She was on a speedboat this time. The sun setting behind her, Robert at the helm like a damn cologne ad. Angela laughed as a pod of dolphins followed them, flipping through the waves. Her voice, mid-laugh, pierced through the video. They say dolphins are the only mammals that have intimacy for fun, so basically, we found our spirit animals. Robert whooped. She zoomed in on the dolphins, not even pretending she had a husband back home. Caption: Nature has better instincts than we do. I clicked the mute button, sat there with the phone in my hand for a full minute. Not angry, not hurt, just done. That was the moment I realized she hadn't just left me emotionally. She'd left the entire life we built. The house, the promises, the dog, the shared history, and in her mind she didn't even see it as a betrayal. She saw it as evolution. Well, she could evolve all she wanted. I was building something better, something mine, and every network I'd ignored, the legal, the financial, the relational, I was threading it together now, not to retaliate, to reclaim. Angela thought she was clever uploading those clips. She had no idea she was documenting her own exile. Angela's first text came at 2:17 a.m. local time. I was in Maine, in bed, not asleep. Can you approve a charge? My card keeps getting declined. No greeting, no apology, no hey, hope you're okay. Just a digital poke from the woman who had spent the last week dry humping nostalgia with her ex-husband across Southern Europe while telling me she was finding her center. I stared at the screen. Thought about all the times she'd forgotten to tell me about charges, the mysterious Venmo transfers, the spa days that were suddenly business retreats. Then I typed, strange, I'll check. And I didn't. Instead, I flipped my pillow, turned on my side, and let the silence answer her. The next morning I made coffee, took the dog out, and checked the wind off the coast. It was strong enough to rattle the screen door and send a few gulls screeching. Angela would have hated that wind. Always said it made her feel exposed. I smiled. My phone rang around noon. It was her sister Rachel, the one who only ever calls when Angela's too ashamed or too lazy to do her own dirty work. Hey Thomas, sorry to bother. Angela's trying to reach you. She says she's stuck in Ibiza. I paused. Is she? She missed her flight. Something about a card decline. Couldn't book another. She's in the airport right now. Totally stranded. Did something happen with the account? I looked out at the water, still holding my coffee, took a slow breath, then answered calmly, she'll figure it out. A long silence on the line. Rachel didn't know what to do with that. She was expecting panic, or guilt, or the classic Thomas move. Sweep it all under the rug for the sake of peace. Not this. Okay, should I tell her you're working on it? You can tell her whatever helps her sit still for 5 minutes. Click. I set the phone down. Walked out onto the porch, watched a lobster boat glide past the cove, the engine humming low and steady. Angela had always called this place grim, said it felt like the kind of town where people disappear without anyone noticing. That was the point. She built her life on curated visibility, posts, captions, outfits that matched the chairs. Even her sadness had filters. But this was unfiltered. She wasn't at a spa. She wasn't on a yacht anymore. She was on a plastic bench at Gate 47 with a dying phone battery, expired loyalty points, and no husband on the other end of the line. And the beauty of it all, she didn't even realize the crack had started forming until the pieces had already fallen. I hadn't yelled. I hadn't threatened. I didn't block her or change passwords or do anything she could screenshot and send to a divorce attorney with a note that said, look, he's unstable. I just waited for her world, the one she built without me, to demand oxygen from a system she no longer controlled. And when it did, all she got was a blue bubble message and a dial tone. She thought she was manipulating the board, but I'd already flipped it. She just hadn't noticed the silence wasn't passive, it was strategy. The call came while I was stacking firewood, mid-chop, sweat down my back, sleeves rolled, axe in hand, like some caricature of rural detachment. I almost didn't answer, but I recognized the number, foreign, likely a burner sim from the front desk. I let it ring twice, wiped my hands on my jeans, and picked up. Thomas? Her voice was tight, frayed, the edge between anger and panic. What is happening? Did you freeze the account? I took a breath, looked at the stack of wood. Even, clean, intentional. You lied, I said, calm, level, like reading out a grocery list. You used our money to vacation with your ex. That's fraud. Angela scoffed, loud enough to draw attention wherever she was. I could hear background noise. He is clicking on tile, an espresso machine, someone checking out behind her, hotel lobby, I guessed. The temporary kind, not luxury, not planned. Oh my God, she hissed. It was a surprise reunion, that's it, we're just friends. I didn't know he'd even be there until… The surprise is over, I said, then I hung up. Not because I was angry, because I didn't need to hear the script. Angela's version of damage control always starts with denial, shifts to guilt flipping, then lands in victimhood like clockwork. You always assume the worst, followed by, this isn't about him, it's about me. And then eventually, you pushed me to this. But this time, she had no cue cards. Just the sharp realization that the man she thought would always absorb her betrayal was no longer a cushion, he was a wall. A few minutes later, she tried again. I let it ring out. Then once more, this time a voicemail. I didn't listen, just watched the transcript scroll across the screen. I can't believe you're doing this. I'm stranded, Thomas. This is humiliating. You're being cruel for no reason. We need to talk about this like adults. I deleted it, then pulled up my browser and booked the same cabin in Maine for another weekend. Angela hated that cabin, said it smelled like smoke and regret. I always found it peaceful. The water didn't lie, the trees didn't pretend. I chose the same room, paid in full. While the confirmation email loaded, I thought about the years I'd spent absorbing every uncomfortable truth and turning it into accommodation. The night she told me she needed space, I gave her a weekend. When she said she wasn't sure who she was anymore, I paid for the yoga. When she said we'd grown too safe, I backed off, thinking maybe she wanted me to be more dangerous. Turns out she just wanted a man who didn't know how to open QuickBooks. The funny part? I wasn't even hurt anymore. Not in the way she expected. I was settled. Because there's something quietly powerful about watching someone try to rewrite the rules, only to realize you've already changed the language. Angela had taken the gamble that most entitled people take. That comfort means permanence. That a quiet man is a powerless one. That she could burn the bridge and still expect mail delivery. Now, sitting in a hotel lobby somewhere in Spain or Portugal or wherever the hell she ended up rerouting herself, she was discovering that silence isn't always surrender. Sometimes it's just the sound of the coming storm. And this time she wasn't holding the umbrella. The apology email came 3 days after the hang-up. Subject line, let's not destroy each other. Angela had shifted from fury to something even more dangerous. Performance. The kind of faux remorse that sounds sincere on the surface but creaks when you press down. She opened with, I never meant for things to spiral like this, followed by the classic repositioning. Seeing Robert was just about closure. I thought I needed to face that part of my past to finally let it go. I see now that it hurt you, and for that I'm truly sorry. Right, because you clink wine glasses with your ex on a yacht when you're trying to close a chapter. She went on to list the charges she'd racked up, 7,200 rounded, of course, promised to pay it all back in good faith, and even CC'd her lawyer, Jonathan Brand, like that somehow gave her proposal moral weight. The offer? Mediation, calm discussions, a path forward that didn't destroy the years we've shared. I stared at the screen for a while, let the cursor hover over the reply button, thought about saying something sharp, something surgical. Instead, I forwarded it to Harold with a 2-word message. Document everything. Then I deleted the thread. No response. No reaction. Angela didn't realize yet that I wasn't trying to win a fight. I was erasing the arena. Later that night, I checked her social media out of sheer habit. Her once hyperactive feed, previously buzzing with sunset filters, healing hashtags, and casual yacht flexes, was dead quiet. The dolphin video? Gone. The clinking wine photo? Deleted. Even the wellness retreat selfies had vanished, replaced with nothing. Angela had always lived by the rule of narrative control. If you couldn't win the truth, at least curate the version people saw. But now the content had dried up, and with it, the illusion. The silence told me everything. She was panicking, not because of guilt, not because of reflection, because she'd lost the audience. Without an audience, Angela had no leverage. And for the first time in 2 decades, she was unarmed. Her sister texted me the next day, an awkward, "Hey, just checking in. Ange said you're not answering." I didn't reply. Sarah, my daughter, called that afternoon. We talked about her job, her husband, the upcoming trip she had planned. Not once did she mention her mother. She knew. Angela, meanwhile, was realizing that all her contingency plans were built on one flawed assumption, that I'd be waiting when she came back to clean up, that I'd do the mature thing, that I'd swallow the betrayal like medicine for the sake of dignity. But I wasn't interested in dignity anymore. I was interested in accuracy. And the accurate truth was, she broke the contract. Not the legal one, the human one. The unspoken agreement that says, if I protect your blind spots, you don't set fire to the map. She thought she could take the map, light the match, and come back when the wind died down. Now she was standing in the ash with no GPS. And I was already 3 exits ahead. She came back 3 weeks later. I know because Rick from the main cabin texted me a photo. Angela's car in the driveway, trunk popped open, one wheel half on the lawn. Guess she found her way back, he wrote. I stared at the image for a second too long. The woman standing next to that battered suitcase wasn't the one who left for a spa retreat. Her hair was pulled into a desperate knot, sunglasses perched like armor, and her clothes, usually curated down to the necklace, looked slept in. She stood there for 5 minutes before even walking up to the porch, like she expected something, anything, to reset the moment she crossed the threshold. Instead, she found a note taped to the door. It was printed, not handwritten. I had thought about handwriting it, but no, that would have made it personal, and we were long past that. The note read, all belongings redirected to storage. Ask David, Wu attorney. T. Angela froze. I could almost hear her inhale through the screen. She tried the doorknob, of course. Still locked, then knocked, like maybe I was watching from the hallway, waiting for some kind of dramatic confrontation. I wasn't there. I was already at the marina in Boothbay, watching boats cut across the water like scalpels. She paced the porch, checked her phone, probably called David, my attorney, who I'd already warned. If she shows up, give her the storage address. Nothing else. A neighbor told me later she sat on the steps for 15 minutes, muttering to herself, staring at the sky like it owed her something. Then she left. Her next stop was Rachel's, her sister. I know because Rachel texted me an hour later. Angela's here. Looks rough. Are you okay with her staying here a few nights? I didn't reply. Not because I was angry, but because the moment someone starts asking your permission after helping set the fire, you've already won. Angela tried calling me twice that night, straight to voicemail. The message she left wasn't angry. It was confused. Thomas, I don't understand. I'm here. I just want to talk. Why are you doing this? I didn't respond. I didn't even listen to the whole thing. I just watched the transcript as it scrolled, like reading dialogue from a character that no longer fit in the story. She called Sarah next. Sarah didn't answer. Then tried again. No dice, because I'd told Sarah everything. Not in a dramatic sit-down. Not in a your mother betrayed me monologue. Just the facts, the charges, the photos, the decision to leave me out of her version of closure. Sarah listened, then said, I always wondered what would happen if you finally stopped making excuses for her. She didn't pick up the phone. Angela must have felt it then. The shift, that silence wasn't just a mood. It was a message. She wasn't locked out of the house. She was locked out of the system. No more soft landings. No more backdoor entries into hearts she'd treated like waiting rooms. She tried texting a friend next, Holly from book club. But Holly had already seen the photo with Robert, and the caption, and the dolphins. By Monday morning, Angela was sitting in her sister's guest room, wearing borrowed sweatpants, scrolling through her own ghost town of a life, wondering when exactly the lights went out. And the worst part? No one told her they were flipping the switch. She didn't see the shuffling of the deck, didn't feel the floorboards pulled from beneath her, until she was already falling. And this time, no one was waiting with a net. She came to my office on a Tuesday, midweek, midday, like she thought I'd be off balance, distracted, maybe still tender. Angela was always good at timing, when to ask, when to press, when to cry. I'd just finished a meeting with the new portfolio client, reviewing a moderate risk retirement strategy. I was calm, focused, sipping burnt coffee from a chipped mug. Then she walked in. She didn't knock. She never had. Wore a blazer I didn't recognize, too big in the shoulders, like she borrowed it from someone who thought business casual meant show them you're trying. Her makeup was minimal but strained, concealer just shy of doing its job. Her eyes were red, not from crying recently, but from crying often. I stepped into the hallway before she could make it past the front desk. She stopped when she saw me. A flicker of relief crossed her face. Hope, maybe. "Thomas," she said, breath catching, "we need to talk." I didn't move, just folded my hands in front of me, the way I did when a client pitched a terrible idea and I was trying to let them fail with dignity. "There's nothing to fix," I said flatly. Her mouth opened, then shut. She reached for a smile and missed. "I made a mistake," she said, voice cracking. "One stupid decision. Please don't throw away everything we've built." I looked at her for a long moment. Not cruel, not cold, just done. "You already did," I said. "I just moved the pieces off the board." That was it. No crescendo, no yelling in the lobby, no dramatic monologues or public breakdowns. She blinked fast, like she thought tears might buy her time, but I wasn't giving her time anymore. I walked past her, slow and deliberate, like passing through a fading photograph. She didn't follow, didn't call out, just stood there, watching me go. Maybe she thought that would be the moment, the reconciliation arc, the vulnerable apology, the return of the quiet, dependable man who always softened at the sight of her tears. But I wasn't interested in being her redemption story. I wasn't angry. I wasn't spiteful. I was finished. By the time I got back to my desk, she was gone. No second attempt, no email. And I realized something as I sat down and reopened the spreadsheet. She hadn't come to fix anything. She came to reset the dynamic. She thought if she showed up with just enough fragility, I'd crack, that I'd reopen the door, reabsorb the mess, and let her name start showing up on accounts again. But she had mistaken survival for softness and endurance for submission. That day, she learned the quiet ones don't explode. They just never open the door again. The house sold in 12 days. Angela thought I'd keep it, cling to the kitchen where she once slow danced to Van Morrison in mismatched socks, or the garden she never touched but always took credit for when company came over. But no, I listed it, priced it to move, and accepted the third offer. Cash buyer, no contingencies. She got her half, eventually, minus attorney's fees, minus the surprise yacht rental I had logged, categorized, and matched to her photos down to the timestamp, minus the hotel charges that didn't quite align with the wellness itinerary, minus the flights that weren't booked through any known retreat. Harold was thorough. Surgical, really. He calculated every line item she had assumed would blur into marital gray space and made them sharp, itemized, real. Angela filed a complaint, of course. Something about financial concealment and intentional obstruction of shared assets. We sat before the judge, a woman with iron gray hair and a wrist brace probably from decades of stamping bad decisions, and watched her skim the documentation. After 15 minutes, the judge removed her glasses and said, "There's no evidence of financial misconduct here. Only regret. Case closed." Angela blinked like she'd just been slapped with a feather, because regret wasn't something you could appeal. A week later, she called Sarah. Our daughter had been radio silent for weeks, not because she wanted to punish her mother, but because she needed time to decide whether forgiveness could coexist with betrayal. Angela must have expected a reunion, a tearful "I miss you" from her only child. But Sarah had inherited the part of me Angela never understood: restraint. "Mom," Sarah said softly, "he told me everything. He didn't want to, but you left him no choice." Angela sobbed, loud, audible even through the voicemail Sarah forwarded me. She cried the way people do when they realize the silence isn't a pause, it's a period. Meanwhile, I sat on the porch in Maine. The wood stove cracked, the air smelled like cedar and salt. My dog lay at my feet, tail twitching in his sleep. I wasn't gloating. This wasn't victory. This was release. The kind of release you don't get from a courtroom win or a snide remark. It's the quiet kind, the one where no one's watching, the kind where you sip black coffee, stare out at a lake so still it reflects the sky, and realize you're no longer holding your breath. Angela wanted closure. She got consequence. And I didn't have to lift a single cruel finger, just the right ones. On a mouse, on a login page, on a signature line, the ones that count when you've spent decades being counted out. The photo showed up a month later. Angela alone on a rocky shoreline, wind pushing her hair into an accidental halo. Her back was to the camera, gaze fixed on the Atlantic like it had something to say. The caption read, "Learning to breathe again." A subtle nod, I suppose. A curated confession, the kind that implies pain without naming the wound, growth without admitting what it grew from. She always knew how to tell half the story with a full expression. I was in Maine when I saw it. Cold morning, coffee in a cracked mug, dog snoring on the porch. I tapped through Instagram absently, mostly to check on Sarah's feed, photos of her new job, her weekend hiking trip, the cat her husband pretends to hate. And there Angela was, framed like a comeback, shot in portrait mode, with a grain filter that made it look vintage and brave, like she'd been shipwrecked and survived something noble. I didn't like it, didn't hate it either, just noticed it. There was nothing in me left to rise up, no reflexive bitterness, no sting in the throat. I closed the app, set the phone face down, then reached for my Polaroid. It was impulse, really. Something quiet inside said, "Mark this." I stepped outside, squinted into the pale sun, and snapped a photo of the lake, the cloud-thick sky, and the second chair beside me. Empty, not mournful, not symbolic. Just, there. I watched the photo develop, the blue haze settling into form, the trees sharpening behind the glassy water. Then I slipped it into a drawer inside the old writing desk she never used. No label, no date. Didn't need one. That image was for me. Not to post, not to share, not to weaponize. Angela had spent her life narrating the version of herself she hoped would land softly with others. But I didn't need an audience anymore. I didn't need a caption or closure, because the thing about people who vanish while you're still clapping for them, they expect the spotlight to stay warm. She thought I'd stand on that shoreline forever, waiting for her to come back, changed, reflective, sorry, but she stayed abroad too long, and I stopped waiting. There was peace in that, not the kind that comes from revenge, the kind that comes when you stop explaining why you left the door open and just start enjoying the silence it left behind. I picked up my book again, turned the page, and kept reading.